I found it this morning, tucked in the back of my old cedar chest, the kind that smells faintly of mothballs and winter coats. My hands shook as I pulled the envelope free. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges, and in the neat, careful script I recognized instantly, it was my daughter's handwriting. 30 years. 30 long years of believing I knew everything about my little girl, and this letter had been hidden from me all that time. I should have been having my usual Saturday morning tea, biscuits cooling on the counter, the sun streaming lazily through the kitchen window, but instead, I was standing there, heart hammering, staring at that envelope like it was a snake ready to strike. It was addressed to me, but there was no name, no Mom or Mama. Just a date, scrawled in the corner, April 12, 1995. I remember that day because I had been at the hospital with her father, God rest his soul, visiting my mother who had fallen ill. I didn't even see her that day, yet here she was, leaving a letter I never got. How many nights did I spend wondering if she was angry, hurt, or confused? And she had been holding this for herself, hiding it like some secret treasure or curse. I ripped it open, trembling, and the first words hit me like a slap. Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. I've carried this alone because I didn't know what to do. Please understand, and then it stopped me cold. My chest tightened, and I felt tears welling before I could even process the words. I stumbled to the sofa, the envelope slipping from my hands, and sat there, the sun falling on my knees, my hands clutching nothing, shaking. I remembered her little face, 5 years old, sitting on that same sofa, legs tucked under her, reading a picture book aloud, her voice a whisper of curiosity and delight. And now, that same little girl, grown, cautious, filled with secrets, had left me this letter, and suddenly, I realized how much I didn't know. How much I had never known. Grandma. A soft voice startled me. My granddaughter, Lily, had come in, holding a stuffed rabbit. She frowned at the sight of me, face full of concern. Are you crying? I forced a shaky smile. No, sweetheart. Just a little tired. But my mind wasn't on tiredness. It was on her mother. My daughter. And the secret she had buried for 3 decades. I wanted to hold Lily, to tell her everything, but how could I explain to a 6-year-old why her mother had been living with a lie for so long? I could hear my daughter's voice in my head, the one I hadn't heard in months. Not long enough ago to forget, not distant enough to feel unreal. She had always been careful, never letting anyone peek behind the curtain of her thoughts. Mom, she would say, I just need some space. And I had given it, thinking she needed room to grow, not realizing she was carrying a burden she didn't trust me with. The letter trembled in my hands, and I began to read again, slowly, savoring each word, dreading each revelation. You need to know why I've been distant. Why I've never been the daughter you hoped for, why I left pieces of myself unspoken. I wanted to protect you, to protect myself. My chest tightened further. What was she talking about? Protection. From what? From whom? I could feel the weight of decades pressing down on me, every memory suddenly tinged with doubt. I remembered the day she turned 16. She had refused to go to the family picnic, telling me she had plans with friends. I had been disappointed, yes, but I had impressed. Now, thinking back, I wondered if she had been hiding more than just teenage rebellion. That night, I stayed up, knitting quietly in the living room, listening to the rain tapping against the windows, thinking she was safe. And all the while, she was carrying this, whatever this was, alone. The smell of the envelope was faint but familiar, like old paper and perfume she might have worn in high school. It made me dizzy with nostalgia and guilt. I ran my fingers over the paper again, trying to memorize the script, every curve and loop of her handwriting. I wanted to remember it, to hold on to it, to keep this connection tangible because I feared what I might find inside. A soft creak from the stairs reminded me that Lily was still there. I called out, go play, darling. Grandma just needs a minute. Her footsteps receded, but I could hear her giggling with her toys, and it was a cruel reminder that life moved on, unaware of the storms inside my chest. I envied her innocence. She didn't know the world yet, didn't know that a single letter could unravel everything you thought you knew about the people you loved. I read further. I met someone when I was 17, someone who changed everything. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared. I thought you wouldn't understand. I thought you'd hate me. I kept it from you, from everyone. The words stopped me cold. 17. My little girl. Someone else. My mind raced, images flashing unbidden, birthday parties, school plays, lazy Sunday mornings. Had there been signs? How had I missed them? And now, all these years later, she was telling me that the life I thought I understood, the child I thought I knew, had been shaped by secrets. I pressed my hand to my forehead, trying to breathe, trying to slow the panic that threatened to overtake me. Every nerve in my body was alive with memory and fear. I could almost hear her voice, hesitant, trembling, as she had written these words decades ago. I felt as if I were meeting a stranger, and yet this stranger was my own daughter. The letter went on. I tried to write this 12 times before, but I couldn't. Every draft felt wrong. I know you might never forgive me, but I need you to know the truth before it's too late. Mom, I am not who you think I am. And because of that, everything in our family has been different than you believed. I dropped the letter into my lap, gasping. My mind reeled. Not who I thought she was. What did that even mean? I felt betrayed, yes, but also a strange surge of sadness and relief. Relief that she had finally trusted me enough to write this, and yet sorrow for all the years lost, all the conversations we had never had, all the hugs and smiles that now felt incomplete. I thought about her wedding. About the baby shower. About all the milestones I had attended, thinking I knew the story. And now, suddenly, every memory was tinged with doubt. Every smile, every tear, every shared secret seemed fragile, like it could crumble in my hands if I touched it too hard. And yet, there was a quiet courage in her words that made me ache with pride. Despite the betrayal, despite the secrets, she had found the strength to tell me the truth. She had done it in the only way she knew how, through words, inked on paper, trembling with fear and hope. I hugged the letter to my chest, feeling the weight of 30 years pressing down on me. I wanted to cry, to scream, to shake her and demand answers. But mostly, I wanted to understand. I wanted to remember the little girl who had held my hand through storms and scraped knees, the teenager who had retreated into her own world, and the woman who now faced me from across time with this confession. The sun had shifted in the window by then, casting long stripes across the carpet. I could hear the kettle boiling in the kitchen, a mundane sound that suddenly felt cruelly ordinary. Life went on, the world oblivious to the revelation that had shattered my morning. I didn't know what I would do next. Call her? Wait for her to come home? Confront her? Forgive her? The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. My mind raced, memory and speculation intertwined, a tapestry of love and fear and regret. I felt old, in that moment. Older than the years that had passed, older than I thought I was. The past wasn't past. It had been lying in wait, patient, silent, and now it had arrived, demanding attention. I sat there, holding the letter, listening to the sounds of the house, the life I had built around these walls, and realizing that nothing would ever feel the same again. And yet, beneath the shock, beneath the grief and the betrayal, there was a tiny, stubborn spark, a hope that we could find a way through this. Somehow. Together. And I whispered softly, to no one but the ghosts of my memories, to the daughter who had trusted me enough to write, to the granddaughter playing upstairs, we'll get through this. Somehow. We always do. The kettle hissed, steam curling up like the questions twisting in my chest. I couldn't bring myself to pour the tea. Instead, I sat with the letter pressed to my heart, trying to breathe through the panic that felt like it might split me open. My mind went back to the very first time she had pulled away from me, not a rebellion, not a childish quarrel, but a quiet, almost imperceptible retreat. I'd brushed it off at the time. Too busy. Too worried about the bills, the garden, the dinners. Too blind to see that my daughter was already carrying something she couldn't yet speak. I remember the way she would linger at the kitchen table, sketchbook open, pencil poised, never meeting my eyes. "Mom," she would say softly, "do you mind if I stay here a bit longer?" I would nod, smiling, thinking she wanted to draw. But now I wonder, was she hiding notes back then, letters she'd never sent, drafts of a truth she couldn't find courage to voice? Lily's laughter floated down from upstairs. I closed my eyes and imagined her tiny hands, her soft curls, the way she would curl up beside me on the sofa when she felt scared. And I thought about her mother, my daughter, how I had never fully known her, not really, not all those years. I got up and wandered to the window. The garden was alive with spring blooms, the scent of lilac and fresh soil drifting in. The world outside continued in its calm, ignorant beauty, but inside me, the storm raged. I thought of my husband, long gone, whose absence now seemed heavier than ever. He had loved her, adored her, and I had always assumed that between us, we had known her fully. How could I have been so blind? I finally set the letter on the table and sat down across from it, staring at the envelope like it might suddenly reveal its secrets without me having to read further. My fingers traced the folds, lingering on the paper as if it could tell me the story through touch alone. But the truth was mine to discover, and mine alone, for now. I called her name softly, though I knew she wasn't there. "Are you hiding something from me?" The words sounded ridiculous, almost desperate, but I couldn't help it. 30 years of maternal instinct surged through me. I remembered the nights she had come home late from school, the tiny white lies I had ignored because they seemed harmless. Were those lies the first fragments of this secret? Were they cracks in the foundation of the family I had thought unshakable? The letter called to me, and I picked it up again. "I need you to know, Mom," it began, "that I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to protect the family. But in doing so, I lost myself. And now, I fear that what I kept from you has changed everything you believed about us. Everything." That single word made me shiver. I remembered her voice as a child, timid but bright, asking why some things couldn't be told aloud. I remembered the nights she would sit beside my bed, eyes wide, begging for reassurance about the world, about love, about herself. And now I realized that reassurance had been harder to give than I had ever imagined. How could I have protected her, when she had been protecting me all along, from the truth, from herself, from the consequences of choices I had no part in? I thought of her teenage years, the small rebellions that seemed so ordinary at the time. Skipping a class here, sneaking out there. Nothing major. But now I wondered if those were more than teenage whims. Were they signs of her wrestling with the secret she held? Each act of defiance, each whispered lie, each look of avoidance, suddenly took on a different meaning. I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. I remembered one particular evening, her eyes shining in the lamplight, holding a small box. "Mom," she had whispered, "I made this for you. Don't open it yet. Promise." I had promised, thinking it was just one of her many crafts. But now, I thought of that box and my heart clenched. What had she been trying to tell me all those years? How many small signals had I missed, thinking she was just a child with hobbies and secrets too small to matter? I went to the kitchen, poured a cup of tea finally, and carried it back to the sofa. The warmth seeped into my hands, grounding me, but it couldn't steady the storm in my chest. I took a sip, tasting the familiar sweetness, and let my thoughts drift again to her father. He had always been the kind of man who believed in transparency, in truth, no matter how painful. I could almost hear his voice, gentle but firm. Secrets never stay buried forever, my love. The letter continued, I met someone when I was 17. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know if you would accept it. I didn't know if I could accept it myself. I paused, reading the line over and over. My mind filled with questions. Someone. Who? How? And why? I felt a twist of betrayal, yes, but also an understanding. I had been young once too, carrying choices and consequences I couldn't yet face. I thought of my own mistakes as a mother, the times I had shouted when I should have listened, the times I had assumed her happiness was aligned with mine. Maybe that fear, the fear of disappointing me, had been what silenced her. Maybe that fear had shaped her life in ways I would only now begin to understand. Lily's footsteps came down the stairs, light and curious. Grandma, she asked. What are you reading? I looked at her, feeling the weight of generations in my gaze. Just an old letter, sweetie. Grandma's thinking about it. I tried to smile, but it faltered. She nodded, satisfied with that answer, and ran off to play again. Watching her, I felt a pang of sorrow mixed with hope. Life carried on. Even after secrets, even after betrayals, life carried on. I returned to the letter, determined to understand, determined to face whatever truth lay within. Mom, she had written, I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I only needed to survive. And now, I hope we can find a way to survive together, too. Survive. That word struck me. Because it wasn't just her survival she spoke of, it was mine, too. The survival of a mother who had always believed she knew her child, who had thought love alone could shield her from the unknown. And now, I realized that love, though powerful, was not enough to shield anyone from the truths we hide from one another. I folded the letter slowly, carefully, and placed it back in its envelope. The sun had shifted again, casting long shadows across the carpet. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the clock, marking time as if it were indifferent to the storms inside me. I felt old, fragile, but also alert, alive in a way that only revelation can make you feel. And I knew that I couldn't stay in this limbo, holding the letter like a talisman, waiting for courage to strike. I had to speak to her. I had to confront the past, the hidden truths, the betrayals, the love, all of it tangled together. I had to step into the storm with her, not behind it, not shielding her anymore, but beside her, as she had wanted all along. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking, and dialed her number. The line rang, each tone a drumbeat in my chest, until finally, her voice. My daughter's voice. A little sharper than I remembered, a little hesitant, but unmistakably hers. Mom, she said, and my heart twisted. There was so much behind that single word. Relief, fear, hope, hesitation. Darling, I whispered, choking back tears. We need to talk. I know, she replied softly, and I could hear the tremor in her voice. The tremor that had been there for 30 years, hidden behind courage and silence. We spoke for hours that morning, voices low, hearts heavy, unraveling the layers of decades, of choices, of truths too long hidden. And though it hurt, though betrayal and fear mingled with love, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, the fragile, trembling beginning of understanding. I realized, as we spoke, that this was the moment when family was no longer just the people you shared a house with, but the people you survived with, together. And somehow, even in the wake of secrets and hidden letters, love endured, stubborn and resilient. I folded the empty envelope, tucked it away in the cedar chest, and looked around the kitchen, the garden beyond the window, the tea cooling on the counter, the house quiet except for Lily's soft laughter upstairs. I felt the weight of the past and the faint pulse of hope for the future. And in that quiet, I understood, the journey ahead would not be easy. The road would be tangled with anger, confusion, and heartbreak. but we would walk it. Step by careful step. Together. After that first long phone call, the house felt different, quieter but heavy with anticipation. I couldn't stop pacing, my hands brushing over the backs of the chairs, the rough edges of the kitchen counter, seeking some grounding in the ordinary while my mind spun with everything she had said, and everything she had left unsaid. I remembered how she had always been careful with her words, each one measured, weighed, calculated. Even now, decades later, I could hear that precision, that carefulness, in the pauses of her speech. I poured myself a second cup of tea, now lukewarm, and sat by the window. The garden was full of spring light, but the shadows cast by the old oak tree seemed longer, darker, sharper somehow. It wasn't just the day outside, the world hadn't changed, but the way I saw it, the way I perceived everything familiar, had shifted. I thought about her as a teenager, the way she would disappear into her room for hours, headphones on, the tiny hum of music drifting out beneath the closed door. I had assumed it was normal adolescent behavior. I had no idea she was wrestling with truths she didn't yet know how to share. The letter had hinted at someone, at choices made in secrecy, and I couldn't stop wondering, who was this person? What had happened? I thought of my daughter's eyes when she smiled at family gatherings, guarded, almost apologetic. Had I mistaken caution for aloofness all these years? I felt a pang of sorrow for every moment I had misread her, for every time I had expected her to conform to my expectations instead of allowing her to reveal herself on her own terms. I remembered a quiet Sunday afternoon when she was 15. She had been sitting on the porch steps, sketching the roses that climbed the trellis. I had sat beside her, pretending to read my book but secretly watching her hand move over the paper, imagining the worlds she was creating in silence. "Mom," she had said softly, "do you ever feel like life is hiding things from you?" I had smiled, thinking it a philosophical musing, a fleeting teenage worry. "Sometimes, love," I had replied, "but we manage. We find out, eventually." I hadn't realized then that she had been speaking from experience, that even at 15, she had secrets too heavy for her small frame. The letter had changed everything. It wasn't just a confession, it was a mirror reflecting decades of assumptions, of love mingled with ignorance. I could feel the weight of it pressing on my chest, suffocating and illuminating all at once. And yet, amid the shock, there was a strange relief, a sense that we were finally at the precipice of truth, ready to face the parts of ourselves we had hidden even from the closest hearts. I remembered the night she had left for college. Her room had been impossibly tidy, her bed made with military precision. She had hugged me at the door, lingering in the embrace, whispering, "I'll call, Mom. Don't worry." I had nodded, fighting the lump in my throat, and watched her drive away, unaware of the weight she carried, the untold stories she had tucked into the corners of her heart. That drive home felt heavier than it had any right to be. The tea had gone cold, forgotten on the side table. I opened the letter again, as though revisiting it could reveal more than the words themselves. "I was scared, Mom," she had written. "Scared you would hate me, scared I would ruin everything. But the truth is, I needed you. I always needed you, even when I pretended otherwise." My hands shook. Scared. She had carried fear for 30 years, hiding it behind polite smiles, behind the routines of life. I thought of all the birthdays I had spent worrying about gifts, parties, achievements, and how little I had considered her internal battles. And now, this fear she had carried in silence was unraveling, pouring into my lap with the force of decades of withheld words. I could almost hear her, 16, 17, standing in her bedroom doorway, letter in hand, heart hammering, wondering if I would accept her, if I could still love her. I thought about the conversations we never had, the small moments that had been lost because we had assumed understanding where none existed. How much had she suffered alone, believing her love for me had to be hidden under layers of secrecy? A knock on the door startled me. It was Lily, holding her stuffed rabbit like a shield. "Grandma, can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, trying to summon some calm in my voice. Of course, darling. She climbed onto my lap, and for a moment, her small warmth grounded me in the present. I kissed her forehead, feeling the soft brush of her hair, the tiny heartbeat against my chest. Grandma, she whispered, what's wrong? I swallowed hard. Nothing, sweetie. Just thinking about old stories, I said, holding her close. And in that moment, I realized the fragile beauty of life, that even as secrets and lies festered, even as betrayal had been part of our history, there was still love. There was still hope. Once Lily had gone back to her toys, I returned to the letter. I had read it multiple times, yet each pass revealed new layers of fear, regret, and love. I know I've changed everything, Mom, she had written. But I hope that by telling you now, we can begin to understand one another. I am still your daughter, even if the choices I made were my own. And I hope that, one day, you can forgive me, not just for hiding, but for being human. I set the letter down again and closed my eyes, feeling the weight of forgiveness pressing on me. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive the years lost, the trust fractured, the assumptions shattered? I knew I could. Love demanded it. The bond between mother and child wasn't defined by perfection but by endurance, by resilience, by the willingness to meet one another in truth, no matter how painful. I thought back to her childhood, to the nights we had spent reading together under blankets, to the whispers of dreams she had shared, half-formed, half-hidden. Every secret, every fear, every choice she had made in private now had a voice, and I could finally hear it. I could finally listen. I remembered the first time she had been heartbroken, the way she had wept silently in her bedroom, muffling her cries with the pillow so I wouldn't hear. I had known something was wrong, had knocked gently on the door, but she had waved me away. I'm fine, Mom, she had said. And she had been anything but fine. Now I understood that heartbreak had been compounded by secrets she felt she could not share, fears she could not voice. I wandered into the living room, still holding the envelope, and looked at the photographs on the wall. Her as a baby, chubby cheeks and wide eyes, smiling at the camera, her as a teenager, poised and careful, always aware of how she presented herself, her as a young woman, radiant yet guarded, the careful balance of strength and fear etched into every line of her face. Each photo now carried new meaning, each memory tinged with the knowledge of what had been hidden. The letter had begun a chain reaction. Memories collided with revelations, with doubts, with love and anger, with sorrow and relief. I felt exhausted, overwhelmed, but also strangely alive. For the first time in decades, I felt the full weight and depth of being a mother, of understanding that love could survive even when trust had been fractured, that bonds could endure even when the foundation had shifted. I looked at the envelope one last time, tracing her handwriting, imagining her hands writing those words, imagining her fear and hope tangled together on that paper. I whispered to it softly, though no one could hear, "Thank you, my darling. Thank you for trusting me, even after all this time." And in that quiet, with the house still around me, with the sunlight falling in uneven patterns across the floor, I realized that the journey had only begun. The letter was not an end, it was a beginning. A fragile, painful, beautiful beginning, a path we would walk together, slowly, carefully, learning to navigate the truths and lies, the love and fear, the secrets and forgiveness. I folded the letter again, gently, and placed it back in the cedar chest. Somewhere in the house, Lily's laughter echoed, reminding me that life moved forward, that love endured, and that even amid betrayal and secrets, there was always the chance for understanding, for reconciliation, for healing. And I whispered once more, to the ghosts of my memories, to the daughter who had hidden so much, to the granddaughter playing above, we'll get through this. Together. We always do. I couldn't sleep that night. The house was quiet, the shadows of the streetlights stretching across the living room floor, yet my mind was alive with questions, with memories, with that letter lying like a weight in the back of my mind. I kept imagining her, my daughter, at 17, hiding a truth that now seemed to stretch across decades. How much had I missed? How many times had I smiled at her,